Before we start, let's analyze these two questions. First, we have how often do you use these strategies? Identifying key content, vocabulary, asking for clarification, and note taking to help you learn better. Now, how do these strategies help you on your learning process? Today, we are going to talk about learning strategies. First, what are learning strategies? Learning strategies are the techniques or actions that learners choose to help themselves understand, learn, and remember new information more effectively. These strategies can be conscious or unconscious, and they vary depending on the task, the learner's preferences, and the learning context. For example, when learning new vocabulary, a student might underline keywords, draw pictures, repeat the words aloud, or connect the new words to their first language. Some strategies, like using a bilingual dictionary or asking a classmate for help, are visible, while others, like mentally organizing ideas or making associations, might not be seen. Good learners are often those who are aware of the strategies they use and can choose different ones tasks for different tasks. More successful learners tend to use a wider range of strategies, adjusting them depending on the situation and their goals. Teachers play an important role in helping learners develop and expand their use of learning strategies. By showing students different techniques and encourage them to reflect on what works best for them, we help learners become more independent, motivated, and effective in their learning journey. Which strategies will be used? Before doing tasks, learners can use strategies such as selecting and setting learning goals, deciding, deciding on criteria to measure how well a task can be done, analyzing the task, its purpose, and what has to be done, and working out the timing of stages. These strategies help learners prepare mentally and logistically, giving them a clear path to complete the task successfully. During the task, learners may use a variety of the strategies like identifying key content, vocabulary, predicting and guessing meanings of words, and asking for clarification. They can also paraphrase, draft work, take notes, and experiment with new concepts. Some may use their first language to check understanding or work peers to clarify vocabulary. These strategies support active engagement and help learners process and apply new information in real time. After completing the task, learners can reflect using strategies such as deciding how to remember new words and concepts, making visual prompts, and reviewing their work. They may exchange work with a peer for feedback, compare their current and previous work, and use editing and summarizing strategies. This helps them evaluate their learning, retain new knowledge, and improve future performance. Here we have examples of strategies.
So it's my turn to explain some key concepts related to the implementations of learning strategies in the Clil classroom. It's really essential for learners to know which are the learning strategies that fits better with the learning process they follow. For doing this, it exists a cycle that students can use in order to keep developing and build on their own strategies for the future while they're learning content or maybe when they are learning language. So here we have a small process of 3 different steps that can help learners and teachers for choosing the best strategies. Here in the first place, we have choosing. Students and teachers need to know and find out which are the learning strategies that students already use. Once this part is completed, it's time for modeling new learning strategies by telling learners how to work out some problems they are having while learning. It's basically using those chosen strategies in the first step to see if these can work out some problems that they are having. And in the third step, we have reflecting. Learners will have some opportunities to try out and talk about new strategies and also reflecting which are the techniques or strategies that were effective with them. And for those that were not effective, well, it's time for look some other strategies that can fit with their learning process. Then we have metacognition include class. Just to remind what metacognition is, it's basically the ability to think about and control our own thinking and learning processes. Be aware of how we are learning and how to improve with these processes. And in Clil, we have a kind of implementation divided in 5 different parts. The first is preparing and planning for strategies, research about how strategies can be useful for learners in certain activities. Then we have selecting and using strategies. Those strategies that we planned before, we need to choose once and then using them. Then we have the third step, monitoring learning. It's time to see if those strategies are working. Then integrating other strategies, which are the mix of strategies that are working in the class. And then evaluating strategies. If this has worked, what can be improved, and this kind of analysis that happens in an evaluation.
Next, we have the classification of the learning strategies. This classification is based on the Cognitive Academic Language Learning Approach, CALA, that is very important for CLIL. It was developed in the United States to meet academic needs of English at that moment, and it is rooted in a cognitive model of learning. This model divides the learning strategies into 3 categories, the first one being metacognitive learning strategies. In this one, learners use metacognitive strategies to control and use their learning processes more effectively. As examples of these learning strategies, we have planning, self-management, organization, selective attention, monitoring, and self-assessment. The second type is cognitive learning strategies. These ones are used by learners to actively engage in knowledge structuring and organization. Examples of this one are using resources, grouping, taking notes, using prior knowledge, summarizing, and others. Finally, we have the last type of learning strategy, which is socio-affective learning strategies. These ones are used by learners to interact efficiently with others. It could be teachers, peers, experts, family, friends, and everyone that is surrounding the learning environment. Some examples of this one are asking for clarification, cooperating, and self-talk. They all work together to ensure that the learners learn correctly.
There are different ways of teaching learning strategies to students. When analyzing learning strategy instruction models, a common focus is on whether they use an explicit or implicit approach. Menegale, in her research, highlights two different models which are relevant to Clil: the cognitive academic language learning approach and the strategic content learning. As you can see on the chart, the cognitive academic language learning approach follows a top-down approach in which the instruction is explicit and control gradually shifts from the teacher to the students. To achieve this shift of control, the teacher follows a 5-stage sequence. During the presentation stage, the teacher sets learning goals, selects suitable tasks, anticipates possible student difficulties, activates prior knowledge, and chooses strategies to teach. Then, on the presentation stage, the teacher presents new strategies connected with the learning of new concepts and language, and exemplifies the strategies by presenting them in meaningful and diversified contexts. After that, during the practice stage, the students practice using the new strategies with teacher support and reflect on their use during learning activities. Following that, on the evaluation stage, the students increase their metacognitive awareness of what they have achieved and assess their learning. And finally, the expansion stage is when the students are encouraged to transfer the strategies learned to other tasks and subjects. As for the strategic content learning, this model follows a bottom-up approach in which the instruction is implicit and the teacher and students work together from the very beginning of the process. 3 stages are followed during SCL instruction. First, the teacher helps students figure out what the task requires and talk about strategies that might help. Then, as students work, the teacher encourages them to think about how they're doing the task and to explain their task approach strategy in their own words. Finally, the teacher helps students evaluate how well they did, how effective their strategies were, and their own perceptions of control and competence. So, which is better, implicit instruction or explicit instruction? Well, according to the author, explicit instruction works better in developing actual metacognitive awareness because students are conscious of the strategies they're using, why they are important, and how they can transfer them to other tasks or subjects. In that same article, the author carried out an analysis of different Clil textbooks in terms of their inclusion of explicit and implicit learning strategies. Cognitive strategies were the most commonly found, with using prior knowledge being the most frequent, followed by using imagery, grouping, making inferences, and using resources. Metacognitive strategies were rare and not explicitly taught. Especially, selective attention and self-management were the strategies that appeared most frequently. Socio-affective strategies were the least included ones. They were mainly promoted through the strategy of cooperating with peers. Unfortunately, strategies such as asking for clarification and self-talk were given little attention. What should teachers do? First, we should give equal importance to cognitive, metacognitive, and socio-affective learning strategies and make sure to include all of them throughout our lessons. We should also provide explicit strategy instruction by including explanations and explicit guidance. And finally, we should encourage reflection on the use of these strategies. This last point is important because it will enable students to transfer the learning strategies from our subject to other subjects and tasks.